Sup, y'all, and welcome to the Jack Vita Show. I'm Jack Vita. Today is August 1st, Thursday, 2019, day after the trade deadline. It is my 25th birthday, believe it or not. So recording a fun podcast today and then hopping on a car ride up to the northern woods of Wisconsin for the weekend. Should be a fun time, but we've got so much to unpack from the trade deadline today. One of my favorite days of the summer. I mean, I love baseball season in general. The trade deadline brings so much excitement, and we got a nice flurry of moves there at the last second yesterday. So I'm going to bring in a guest who's going to help me break down and unpack this trade deadline. He lives just outside of Houston, is a student at Texas Christian University, studying sports broadcasting, has a radio show of his own. Chad Vautherine. Chad, how are you doing this morning?
Dude, Jack, probably not as well as you. I mean, it's your birthday today, which, by the way, happy birthday. I'm thrilled and honored that we're able to do the show today, especially on your big day, man. But dude, I'm doing really well. Like you said, this is also one of my favorite days of the summer, just because it gives, I think, a good picture of what possibly postseason could look like in the next couple months. And so I think the trade deadline, especially for my Astros, a huge day for the Astros as well as just MLB in general. And so I was not expecting that until the last couple hours of the deadline. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, man, I'm doing really well, Jack.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad to have you here on my birthday. It's funny, the older you get, your birthday just changes because as a little kid, you get so excited, you count down the days, and now you're just like, it's just the day, and you work and you do stuff. And in fact, I like doing stuff. I'd rather do this than just be lazy laying around all day.
Oh yeah. I hope we're not both getting to the point where our birthdays we have to calculate how old are we anymore, because I mean I don't think we're at that point yet. We're still pretty young for the most part, but I think that's going to hit us sooner than later rather. But yeah, no, Jack, I was trying to look up prior to this show any famous athletes or baseball players or just anybody in general who had similar birthdays as you, August 1st, but it was actually pretty hard to find. There was one baseball player who does share the same birthday as you. He's turning 49 today. Do you happen to know a guy named Kevin Jarvis by chance?
What team did he play on?
So I think the question is, what team did he not play for? He played for he played for 10 different teams. I think he also played for a team in Japan, but he spent most of his time, I think, with the Cincinnati Reds. He pitched in the 90s and early 2000s. But yeah, he was one of those guys. He got traded around. He probably would have been one of the names in a trade deadline, way back then, if he probably would have been a guy that got moved around for 10 different teams. But yeah, that was just something fun. I was just trying to look up. Yeah, you and Kevin Jarvis both are both have birthdays today, which is kind of cool. But yeah, August 1st, really, not a lot of people, I guess, famous people that I know of, or probably that you know of, share the same birthday as you. So it's a special day, I think, for you, Jack. So
yeah, I'm looking it up right now. I guess Jason Momoa. We got Aquaman. I do remember as a kid, because I was reading Sports Illustrated Kids, and they had when your birthday is, and they put athletes' birthdays for each day. And Stacey Augmon from UNLV for some. I don't know why I remember that. And I think Edger and James. I think those two.
Oh wow.
No baseball guys though.
Yeah, not very many baseball guys.
Well, we got so much to get to today, Chad. I'm glad you're joining us. I want to share real quick for those who don't know Chad, because I know a lot of you. This is an introduction to Chad, and hopefully he'll be joining me again on this podcast as a featured player.
No, that would be the dream, really.
Yeah, it'd be great. So I met Chad down in Panama City Beach. It was about a month and a half ago, and he was serving on a summer missions project with my sister, who also goes to TCU. How'd that go for you, Chad?
It went so well. It was the mission project he's talking about. It's called Kaleo, which is part of a college youth ministry called Student Mobilization, STUMO for short. and it's a 9-week program where during the day you work a job, and during the evenings you go through different content like Bible studies. We'll have pastors and speakers come in, and we'll get to listen to them. We have a day called World Prayer where some members get to present on different nations of the world, and we get to pray for people who are unreached people groups in the 1040 window, section of the world. And dude, Jack, it was awesome. It was actually my second summer out there. So I've gone there for the last 2 years. So this is my second year, and I absolutely loved it. I could honestly see myself going back one more summer, because I've one more summer before I graduate college, before I graduate TCU. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. It was a blast. Incredible people were there. I made some even more friends than I thought I could have, and definitely grew in my relationship with God. So it was awesome. It was such an incredible summer.
Wow, that sounds great. I'm a little jealous I didn't get to go on something like that, but it sounds like you had a great time. One more nugget about Chad I should throw in there. Chad used to play some baseball, right?
Yeah, yes, I did. Yes, yeah, you have a good memory, Jack. Before going to TCU, I played baseball at a Division III school called Shriner University, and it's one of the most competitive D3 conferences in the country. We had, out of the 8 teams in the conference, I think 3 of them are national champions,
Wow.
and one of them was a runner-up within the last 20 years. So, of course, my team, we were in last place in the conference, so we struggled against some good competition. But yeah, I love the game of baseball. I absolutely do. It's my number one sport, one of my biggest passions. And so yeah, I was a ball player growing up. So I miss it, but doing things like this, being on podcasts and radio shows and studying broadcasting, it kind of helps me stay involved.
Yeah.
I still feel like I'm in the game.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's get into it today. And what better place to start than the Houston Astros, the team that you follow the closest. They made some waves yesterday. It was a weird day because I remember everyone was like, nothing's really happening. Maybe the biggest moves have already happened, which a couple of trades that we'll get to a little later. But right after the deadline passed, all this news started to leak out over the next half hour. I was watching MLB Network, and Rosenthal just drops a bombshell, tells everyone, the Zach Greinke to the Astros. What can you tell me about this trade, Chad? I mean, it's clear that the Astros are now the team to beat in the American League if they weren't already. It's a 3-headed pitching staff. But why don't you tell me a little bit about what they had to give up and what your immediate reaction to this trade was?
Well, I absolutely loved this trade because it fills in a hole for the next couple of years, because after this season, Garrett Cole was going to be a free agent. And so we do have a couple prospects in the Astros farm system, like Forrest Whitley, who's a top 100 prospect. He's expected to come up next season. But, not even talking about this season, Zach Greinke will be able to stick around hopefully for another season or two. And so this fills a big hole in the Astros rotation for a problem that they will have next couple seasons. Now, granted, when I say problem, this is not just like a regular team problem, because when you're talking about the Astros, they now have like 4 or 5 All-Stars in their starting rotation. So it's not a problem at all. But if you want to talk about just the Astros staying, playing at a high caliber rate and just having a very well polished pitching staff, then yes, they fill this hole. I absolutely love Zach Greinke. I've enjoyed watching him. He's 35 years old now, I believe. So he and Verlander, I believe, is 36 years old. And so they have so much experience just pitching in the league, and they're going to be able to just add so much insight, and they're definitely those veteran pitchers. And it almost seems like both of those guys, the older they get, they're also just pitching better and better each year. I mean, Verlander could be on track to win the Cy Young Award this year. Yeah. And Greinke is pitching at that level as well this year. And I absolutely love the trade. I love it, and I'm really excited for Zach Greinke to get settled down in Houston. But Zach Greinke is definitely, I've heard, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Zach Greinke's like off the field character. He is a bit of a character. I know he struggles a little bit with a social anxiety disorder, which it won't be an issue, obviously, but it's interesting to look at just kind of from an outside of the lines perspective.
Yeah, and it's almost like he's underrated too. He's got 2.9 ERA this year. People aren't talking about him enough. And you know what's funny? This is a little off subject. You know who else is being underrated right now? Kershaw.
Yes.
Kershaw's got like a 2.85 ERA, and it seems like everyone has just moved on from him.
Yeah, I mean, when you have Ryu, who has like a 1.75 ERA, I think, like just blowing everybody away in the majors right now. I mean, he's, Ryu, I consider Ryu to be their number 2, and Kershaw is still, in my eyes, the Dodgers' ace pitcher.
Yeah.
Because he's Clayton Kershaw. Like, it's very hard to not have him as that guy. And he's the face of the franchise for the most part. But yeah, he's definitely flown under the radar, especially with his battle with injuries the last half season, as well as a little bit at the end last year, and he kind of fell off in the playoffs. But yeah, you are right. I haven't really heard much about Kershaw myself this season.
So going back to this Astros trade, what can you tell me about the guys that the Astros had to part ways with? Because unless you follow the Astros very closely, the only guy that people should really know about is Seth Beer because he's a top 100 prospect. What do you think about this haul that Arizona's getting back? And I mean, clearly they're also dumping salary too. Tell me a little bit about these guys that they had to part ways with in order to make this deal happen.
Yeah, well, clearly, obviously we can tell Arizona is in a rebuilding process, and I think they're on their way to be a contender out in the NL West in a couple of years. I think these guys are perfect for them just to kind of build that around. Corbin Martin, he's actually a Houston area product. I got to see Corbin Martin. He was just a couple years older than me when he was in high school. And then I also got to see him pitch a couple months ago when he pitched against the Chicago White Sox. He made one of his starts with the Astros against the White Sox. So I got to see him pitch at Minute Maid. And he's definitely more of your traditional starting pitcher. So he has a good fastball, a good curve change. He'll mix in a cutter and slider in every now and then. But he's definitely more of your traditional starting pitcher. But he's going to be a great asset, I think, to the Diamondbacks if he stays in that system. But the Diamondbacks, they're getting some very good pieces. I think I was joking with you earlier, Jack. Seth Beer. I guess the dream of every Astro to get an Astros jersey with the name Beer on the back. Those dreams are kind of over now, but so I mean, but he's a top 100 prospect, so definitely somebody that the Diamondbacks are seriously considering to build around if he continues to progress in the minor league system. And then Josh Rojas, he's an infielder, outfielder, a big utility player. A lot of people have compared him to, I don't know if you're familiar with Martin Gonzalez. He was a huge utility piece, especially in the Astros World Series run, and also their just run to get out of their cycle of losing. He was a key contributor to the Astros' success and just kind of how they are now. So they've definitely compared Rojas to, and they also are getting JB Bukauskas, which I don't know much about JB, but he is a starting pitcher. But they can also I know that he does throw hard. I looked at a couple of his just logs, and so they could possibly move him to the pen eventually. But they're getting those 4 main pieces, all very highly qualified prospects, all for Zach Greinke, which rightfully so, it makes sense because he is Zach Greinke.
Yeah, and they were able to hold on to Forrest Whitley and Kyle Tucker. Sorry.
Yes. Those are the 2 pieces I was afraid that we would have to give up. Forrest Whitley, former number 1 draft pick for the Astros. He's been doing really well. He's in low A. He got promoted to high A recently, and he pitched really well this past week. I think he had 9 or 10 strikeouts in 7 innings in a high A game, which is very impressive. But I was afraid we'd have to give him up, as well as Kyle Tucker. But we did not have to, which, Jeff Luhnow, the Astros GM, he did a phenomenal job with orchestrating all this for us to get Greinke.
I would say the other key great thing about this trade for the Astros is they kept the Yankees from getting Greinke.
They did, which the Yankees they were a little quiet during this trade deadline. Which and if you look at the Yankees, since the All-Star break, I believe I read a stat the other day. Their starting pitching staff has a combined ERA about 7.5 since the All-Star break, and so clearly they are hurting in their rotation right now, just in terms of how they've pitched recently. And so Greinke would have been a perfect asset for them. Also, Greinke, if you think about it, he kind of fits the character of a Yankee, like veteran, needs to get paid well, and a lot of experience. Like, he would be the perfect Yankee pitcher.
Well, the one thing I would say about that is I don't know if he would like being in New York and having the big, spotlight on him. I think he kind of likes to be his own guy in a smaller market, but...
Right, I would agree with that. Especially Greinke just being off the field. I like Arizona. I think was great for him, and Houston. Yeah. It's not a big market, but they're a big team. Which the Astros, they don't get a lot of coverage as it is, even though they are doing so well. But yeah, I think Houston is the perfect fit for him. I think you're right about that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this a little bit from the Yankees' perspective and how this leads into some of the other moves that were made. The Yankees did not have a ton of options in terms of trades because if they wanted Bumgarner, they were going to have to pay a lot for a rental player, which the Giants really, you had to overwhelm the Giants to get him because the Giants are competing right now. They're only a couple games back from the wild card. They're fighting. It's Bochy's last year. It's a great story. And if you're a Giants fan, you want to keep seeing the Giants in the mix here and going for it. So they couldn't go for... they were going to have to pay a lot for Bumgarner. Stroman is in their division, and it's tough to make those in-division trades. And then I know some Yankees fans were upset that they didn't get Bauer, but why would the Indians want to trade Bauer to the Astros or the Yankees, which were some of the rumors, because they're aiding a team that they're potentially going to have to go through in the playoffs. So it seemed like the big ticket guys, there weren't many of them out there for the Yankees. And if they wanted them, they were going to have to overwhelm the Mets for Wheeler or Syndergaard or for Greinke.
Yes, yeah, and I think from the Indians' perspective as well, they're still hurting because they don't have Corey Kluber right now, who he's still making recovery. And so you are right. The Indians' starting rotation, I think, they're still very solid. They have Clevenger, who had to get moved from the bullpen, I believe, and he's now in the rotation. They have the All-Star MVP, Shane Bieber. But from the Indians' perspective, you're like, why would you trade away your ace starting pitcher right now, especially when you're kind of hurting? But you are right that they're looking for teams down the road. And I think that the Yankees, they would have had to given up so much just to get one of these other big ticket guys, and they will get somebody in the offseason. There will be some type of free agent. I can honestly see Garrett Cole, who we just mentioned earlier, Astros. Pitcher who's leading the league in strikeouts right now. He's scheduled to be a free agent this upcoming offseason, and I could see the Yankees potentially signing him to a 1 or 2 year deal. Yeah, and the Yankees they're always going to stick around in the playoffs, and so I don't think that was the biggest of their concerns because they would have had to give up a lot, and they're in a pretty good position right now with a good lead. But it certainly cannot start slipping away because their pitching has struggled just a little bit.
Yeah, that must be what they're looking at in terms of free agency is the place for them to acquire. They've got all the money. I do feel like Greinke was a missed opportunity for them. So for the Astros to strike there was huge. Let's talk about some of these other trades that ended up happening. Let's talk about the Bauer one. This one may have been more shocking than the Greinke trade when I got that notification on, I believe it was Tuesday night. Bauer to the Reds? What?
Yes, Bauer to the Reds, and not to mention, that was Tuesday night, and Yasiel Puig was in the big brawl between the Reds and the Pirates, and then I want to say, wasn't it just like maybe an hour or two later after that game, you saw Puig's name in the trade, and you're like, wow, what a story that is. I mean, that was huge.
Well, I actually think he had been traded.
Oh, he had been traded before,
and he was still in
yes,
the brawl afterwards.
I think you're right about that. Yes, I didn't watch the game actually, but yeah. What a story that is if that were to be the case. That's pretty crazy. And the Indians, offensively, they're very solid, but they just got even. I think they just built their offensive foundation even more because they're going to face some good pitching. And right now, at least, they don't have the staff that they normally do in their rotation. And so going into the playoffs, they're going to have to definitely rely on their offense. So this is a great. I think the Indians won definitely in this situation, but the Reds, from a rebuilding standpoint, struggling this season. Obviously, but Trevor Bauer, I don't know, in my opinion, how long he will stick around. Cincinnati,
he's only got 1 year left after this year.
Yes, exactly. So I could see him going to a big contender in the offseason. But and then we forget about San Diego. They're also in the mix. They got Taylor Trammell.
Great addition right there.
That
guy could be a superstar.
Oh, I think he is a superstar in the making. He is extremely athletic. And we forget about the Padres. They've definitely gone under the radar, which, we saw them make huge moves in the offseason, signing Machado, getting other guys as well. And so we thought the Padres were going to be like the team, the hot team, but they've kind of slid under the radar as well.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny that the final moments of Bauer in an Indians uniform is him chucking the ball into center field.
Yes.
And then Puig's final moments in a Reds uniform is him getting in a brawl.
Yeah. It definitely speaks to, I think, the culture that's changing in baseball today. Players are starting to show a little more attitude, and I think it still is a very classy game. It's still very much so a gentleman's game, but they're starting to, I wouldn't say lash out a little bit, but they're starting just, to show a little bit more of how they are, off the field, and they're taking that on the field. But Trevor Bauer, that was kind of an impressive toss. It's really hard to just, stand there, just chunk it almost 300 feet. That's not an easy throw to make, especially after, you just pitched a couple innings. But yeah, that's pretty funny. You don't see that every day.
I never really thought the Indians were actually going to trade Bauer because we kept hearing about it ever since last offseason. It seemed like the world wanted them to trade him more than the Indians actually wanted to trade him, because always, oh yeah, maybe they want to trade Bauer. They want to trade Bauer. And I just couldn't believe it. But then I kind of wonder if he had a great feeling that he was going to be leaving soon. He didn't want to, and that was part of the anger and emotion and frustration that he showed in that moment. That was a factor in building up to that frustration.
I mean, I don't know. I might have done the same if I were getting traded from the Indians, to the Reds, who aren't even in contention for playoffs. I mean, I don't know. I probably would have been just as frustrated as Bauer, but
you go out with some fireworks,
right? Yeah, exactly. Go out in style. I mean, seriously, he got to show off his cannon. He certainly can throw the baseball. So yeah, no, that was a big trade. It was just a day before the deadline, I believe, and so. That was a huge trade, and a lot of players are definitely involved in that one.
Did you see that Bauer was at the Indians game last night?
Yes, I did, because the Astros played the Indians last night. They did. So I believe they showed him for a second or two. But I was like, oh wow, holy smokes, that's Trevor Bauer.
He was just hanging out in the stands in regular clothes.
Yes, isn't that so? Yeah, he's a character off the field, if anybody, I think. And I think the Astros also have a history with him, just from the playoffs the last couple seasons. They I believe, I don't know if you've seen with Alex Bregman, he's kind of taunted Trevor Bauer on social media a little bit. I think George Springer's kind of been in that mix as well, but he's a character as well. And the Astros have had good success off of Trevor Bauer, but you have to say, Trevor Bauer is just so impressive, but that is such a Trevor Bauer move for him to just kind of still be hanging around, with nothing to do, watching two very good teams. But yeah, I did see that. That was really funny.
Yeah, Trevor Bauer with one of the best Twitter handles in baseball at Bauer Outage. Brings a lot of great content. My two favorite baseball Twitter accounts are him and Jose Canseco. It's always, you never know what they're going to say next, but it's always gold.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, you don't see, an attitude like Bauer. I feel like you don't see that a lot in from MLB players. I think maybe Tim Anderson, if you know like how he kind of was, he got a little outraged, I think, at the beginning, just the whole attitude thing, and he got suspended. But yeah, I think more and more now you see MLB players showing more attitude, a little more flair, and bringing their own style, into the game. It's not just the game of baseball now. It's starting to change a little bit season after season.
I want to talk just a second about this from the Reds' perspective. So the Reds are getting Bauer. They got 1 year left of control after this year. I think the Reds could end up being really good next year. I do.
I do as well. They do have a very good farm system because they are rebuilding. They've gotten some very great draft picks, but and I think the NL Central, I think that is a division that needs a new team. The Cardinals and the Cubs, they're still up there, but I think both those teams are due to fall off in a couple seasons, and they do have obviously some good talent, but when some of these guys here, or now I think in a couple seasons, will be considered veteran players for those two clubs. We don't know how consistent they're still going to be. So I do think the Reds, they have something going really well over there in Cincinnati. I think they could be really good as well.
Yeah, their pitching has always been their weakness, and this year it's been a strength. Now, they did ship out Tanner Roark to the A's, which I think is a nice little pickup for the A's because they could use a little bit of pitching depth, and he's been a quality pitcher this year. I believe his ERA has been just under 4, or maybe a little over 4. He's been really good this year for the Reds in a hitter's park, and now he's moving over to a pitcher's park. It's a nice little ad there for the A's, but that leaves them with a 3-man, a 1-2-3 of Bauer, Luis Castillo, who's on a path towards a Cy Young this year, and no one's talking about him. And Sonny Gray he's had a nice bounce back year. No one's talking about him either.
Yeah, nobody's talked about Sonny Gray this year. I'm still trying to get into my brain that he is in Cincinnati. I always forget that, but yeah, no one's really talking about their pitching staff at all because they've always been. They are in a hitter's park, and so they've always been, very good offensively. But you are right. I do think that the Reds have something going special for them now. If they keep Bauer or not, we really don't know. But I do like the direction that Cincinnati is going.
Yeah, it was a lot to give up if Bauer leaves in a year and they don't have any success next year. So it's important that they're able to at least extend him for maybe a couple years. I know Bauer has said he's expressed interest in the past in signing 1-year contracts and just kind of floating around the league. So who knows? He's a wild card. We'll see what happens. But I think this team has the pieces now to make a push for the division next year. As you mentioned, they have a great bullpen. Their lineup is stacked. They got some nice young guys in there like Nick Senzel, in addition to the vets like Joey Votto. I like Jesse Winker a lot. He's been a little cold this year, but I think he's gonna turn it up at some point. I think this is a good team. What do you think about the Roark trade for the A's?
Oh, I love it. The A's are in a position to be a wild card team, and they picked up a couple other players as well. So they had the Tanner Roark trade, and I believe they had. I'm trying to find it here. I actually just read. Oh, they acquired Jake Dykman from the Royals, which that will definitely help them a lot. And the A's, they're always a team. They're very quiet until the end of September, October comes around, and then something just happens in Oakland where it's like magic. I think the A's are a playoff team, and I think that fills their holes perfectly. I think for going into the season, and they put up a lot of runs. As well, being the Athletics, but I think this is perfect for the Oakland Athletics. I really like that, and I really like Tanner Roark as well. Very underrated pitcher, I think, around the league. But if you were to ask probably other players who do play I think they would have high praises for him.
Yeah, this is a nice pickup. The A's have not quite had the magic in October quite yet. Hopefully, for their sake, they get to have a nice magical run one of these years. But this is a good team. They're very fun to watch. They have so many good young players, and one thing I love about them is how great they are defensively.
Yes. Oh, yes. They've always been great defensively, and and especially in a big ballpark that they play in the Coliseum, you have to, especially your outfield, they have to definitely hold it down out there. And then in I think a couple of weeks ago, didn't they pick up? They have Homer Bailey now, right?
Yeah, another former Red.
Yes, another former Red. So the Reds and A's doing a lot together, and then of course Mike Fiers, Mr. No-No earlier this season.
Yeah.
I mean, their rotation is looking very well, and did you see? Speaking defensively, I mean, this is just something small, but I mean, Chad Pinder last night made, I think, like a top 2 or top 3 play on SportsCenter. Like they always do so well defensively. But yeah, and then of course they have the Platinum Gold Glove winner over at the hot corner, Matt Chapman.
Yeah,
I mean always solid. But the Athletics, I think they're definitely going to surprise a lot of people in the postseason this year, regardless of who they play. They'll definitely, I think, most likely get that wild card spot, unless the Astros were just to fall off the table the next month and a half. But yeah, I like where the Athletics are going into October.
Another interesting move from the Reds' perspective is they shipped out Scooter Gennett, which it's kind of interesting when you see some of these moves, because from the perspective of the Giants, they made a move like they held on to Bumgarner. They're making a push. They dealt some relievers. We'll get to that. But they have so much depth in their bullpen that they were able to sell a couple of pieces. It seemed like the Scooter trade was a little bit of raising the white flag, which is just very contradictory to the Bauer move. It must be that the Bauer move is about next year, because Scooter Gennett, people who listen to this podcast know I am his number one fan. I'm the founder of the Scooter Gennett fan club. And, this guy, I thought he should have gotten a Silver Slugger last year at second base. He hit .310, close to 30 homers, 100 RBIs. Fantastic player. Makes some nice plays defensively, too. This is a great ad for the Giants. I know he's a rental player. I don't think they had to give up a whole lot. But this is like, if I'm going to make a comparison to a former Giants middle infielder, it reminds me a little bit of when they had Marco Scutaro and what he was able to do for the Giants down the stretch. I think that was 2012.
Yes, and I think this is great for Scooter because he's now in a playoff race potentially. I mean, the Giants are hanging around right there, and now that they're in contention again, I think this is great for Scooter. And I think if he does get the opportunity to get a little bit of playoff postseason experience this upcoming fall, then I think that would just experience him and just make him an even better asset, I think, for the future. And I agree with you, Jack. I think he does deserve a big contract. I mean, he's definitely he has grown so much, I think, since he's come to the league in the past couple of seasons. Definitely one of the more elite power hitters in terms of second basemen.
Great hard contact guy.
Yes, yeah. And also, if you look at him, he swings a huge bat. Is that just me, or is his bat just like he has a really long bat? He swings a really heavy bat, but he can swing it for sure. He can definitely handle it. But yeah, I think this is a good move for Scooter. I think it's good for Scooter in his shoes, but the Reds, you kind of have to scratch your head, and man, like that's a tough loss for them.
Yeah, it must be. We're gonna clear some room for Senzel maybe to get back to second base, which he's more of a natural infielder. They have that other guy, that outfielder. The guy's been playing left field. I want to say his name's Van Aert. Yes. Yeah. Did I say that correctly? Is that his name?
Yeah, that's how I say it. I think I just kind of I just go for it.
Yeah, and he's really good. I think they want to clear some space to give some of these young guys a chance. Maybe they want to bring Scooter back as a free agent because Scooter's a hometown kid. He was a great story here in Cincinnati. It's a little sad that it came to an abrupt ending. But he has not done a whole lot since he came back from injury. Gosh, since he came back from injury, and I think he's going to be a huge contributor for the Giants here down the stretch. He's a bat that can really space out your lineup, so I like that ad for them.
Yes, and especially now that he gets he gets the Cove, in right field for him. I think you'll be seeing a lot more long balls this next half of the season.
Yeah.
Now that he has that in right field.
Yeah, great point. Let's talk about another, probably the biggest other name that got dealt before the deadline, Marcus Stroman. I believe he was dealt over the weekend over to the Mets. And this one was very surprising. It sounded like a lot of people were like, oh, well, what the Mets are trying to do here is maybe they want to flip him, or they're trying to monopolize the trade market. So if you want to make a trade for a pitcher, you're gonna have to go to them if you want Syndergaard or Wheeler, because now Stroman's off the board. But in typical Mets fashion, they did not sell on anyone. So this one, the Mets just confuse me every year. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and they had to give up two huge prospects, one of them being Simeon Woods Richardson, who he's actually a local product. He went to a high school in my district, and so I've faced him before, and that guy is good. And I think he has, I was looking up his stats, he has like 97 strikeouts in 78 innings in low A ball this season. They also had to give up Anthony Kay. So for Stroman, who doesn't seem like he's going to be, we don't know how long he'll be with the Mets. I haven't looked at his contract exactly, but it's kind of an odd move for the Mets, and they must be doing something. They could potentially use him for another piece, but I don't know how long Stroman has on his contract. I haven't looked at that yet, but it is kind of odd for the Mets to do that, but they're certainly in a rebuilding process.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you one of my big winners from the deadline. They may have slid under the radar unless you're a big baseball fan and you follow this stuff closely. Do you know who I'm going to go with here?
Potentially. I could maybe see. Are they in Atlanta? Maybe.
Yes.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Yes. Then yes, I do know who you're going for.
I love what the Braves did here. They did not have to give a whole lot up, and they added 3 really good bullpen pieces that is going to be big for them, because I've been high on their starting rotation for a while. As people who listen to the show regularly know, I like a lot of those young guys. Max Fried is a stud. He's a guy who's a star in the making. Soroka's been fantastic for them. Fultonevich has struggled this year, but he got Cy Young votes last year. Keuchel was a great ad for them. And Newcomb has been very good too. So they have a lot of really good young pitchers. Some of them might get moved over to the pen during the postseason. The bullpen had been a concern for many people, but they had 3 really good bullpen arms here in Shane Green, Mark Melancon, and Chris Martin, who's the Rangers' best reliever, by the way. Another one people don't know. Not the guy who sings in Coldplay, just to clarify that.
Yeah, different people.
But they got 3 guys, and they didn't have to part ways with a whole lot in their stacked farm system that they have.
Yeah, this was a great move for the Braves, and it definitely went under the radar as well, as you were saying earlier, but this is exactly what they needed to set themselves up well for the postseason. I think we saw them last year in the series against the Dodgers. They struggled a little bit in all the back halves of their games in that series because they did not have great depth in their pen. And yes, they lost a couple pieces in there, but as well, I think this is exactly what they needed. And again, it's great because these are guys that they're solid contributors to the pen that they were in, but they didn't. The Braves did not really have to do anything major to get these guys, and that's exactly, I think, what a trade deadline should look like. Is key contributors to a ball club who they don't necessarily have to be big names, but you just give up these random pieces, to come and build together, an even bigger piece. And these 3 guys certainly meet, I think, all those expectations for the Braves. And I really like the Braves. I think outside of the Astros, I think the Braves are the winners of the trade deadline.
I would agree. I am a big fan of the way the Braves have built their team. They haven't been spending a ton of money. They got a lot of controllable guys, and they're not sacrificing the future. They know that they have a nice window here for a few years. Would it be great for them to win it this year? Absolutely. But I think they're capable of doing it now. They added a few bullpen guys. The Melanson thing, they basically just said, we're going to eat the salary, which was bold. I like that. And they've been smart about spending their money, so they're able to do that. And since they've locked up Acuna and Albies for such a long time on the cheaper side, I think they're set up very well here.
I think they are as well. And we could see, I think, all those three guys to the pin. And then I believe, just looking at their depth chart, probably Soroka, Teheran still there, Keuchel, Fried, and then Kevin Gausman, who's kind of in and out.
Yeah.
That could be a rotation. They can even mix one of those guys in there at any point. If they're in maybe like a Game 7 situation where they maybe want to start one guy for a couple innings. But I think they're set up very well. And then they also just have so much young talent offensively. I mean, with the come up of Austin Riley now, who's made himself a big name, and then obviously Acuna Jr. and Albies and Duvall as well. The Braves. They have been set up so well, and they've done it in such a short amount of time. I think the season before last, they were towards the bottom of the NL East, and now they're on track to make the playoffs for 2 seasons in a row. Yeah. So I think this is a perfect move for Atlanta. I think they did a very good job in the deadline.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention that on top of all those pitchers, they've got Kyle Wright, who's, I believe, number 40 prospect in baseball. It depends on what list you're looking at. And Touki Toussaint, who was top 100 entering this year. I think he was top 50 or top 60. And they've got him in the bullpen. So they have so many options. Bryce Wilson has been solid for them, too. So they have a lot of guys that they can mix and match for a playoff series. I think they have a great chance of beating the Dodgers, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think the Dodgers have been the team to beat in the whole league this entire season. But, kind of just a little rematch that we could potentially see that from last year's series. I really do think that they have a good chance as well. I think if anybody in the National League playoff race this upcoming season were to beat the Dodgers, I think that the one team that would be Atlanta.
Another trade that I like that was a little under the radar move. How about the Phillies grabbing Corey Dickerson?
Yeah, the Phillies. I think the Phillies. They shocked a lot of people this year. They had huge moves obviously in the offseason with Bryce Harper, but I think they underperformed. But I think it's good because Corey Dickerson, very great defensively. He contributes at the plate. I really think that I think it's a good move. I haven't really looked too much into the Dickerson move in terms of I think what is that going to do for Philadelphia as a whole, but it certainly does not hurt Philadelphia in any way.
I like him a lot. He was a Gold Glover last year. He may have been an All-Star. I think I voted for him last year. He was hit close to around 300. Really good player. And Pittsburgh, their outfield situation, they were going to have to move him or Polanco because Brian Reynolds has come up and he's been a revelation for them. I think he's hitting like 330.
Yes.
The centerpiece of that McCutchen trade. So they kind of had to make way for some of these young guys to play. So they shipped out Dickerson. I think this is a nice little ad for the Phillies.
I think it is too, and I think with guys like Harper next to him, Harper's struggling a little bit, but then you also have Nick Williams Jr. and some other guys over in Philadelphia who I think could help him out a lot. I think Dickerson could be a key part, and the Phillies are still rebuilding. They need, I think, a couple more seasons, probably more backup in their pen, I think, and just more contributors at the plate to be consistent for the Phillies just to be in kind of that talk again. We saw, I think, little flashes of what the Phillies could be like in these years to come, just at the end of last season and throughout most of them before they were snubbed. But I think it's a great move for the Phillies as well. I do like it. And Corey Dickerson, he's just one of those everyday guys that's going to give his best every time he shows up to the ballpark and never complains, doesn't need the spotlight as well. And so, yeah, I really do like that for Philadelphia.
And I think the Kutch injury really hurt them a lot because he was excellent in the leadoff spot for them, setting the table, great vet to have around the club, and losing him, it seemed like they've gone downhill big time since he got hurt.
Yes, it definitely was big, and he started off the season doing very well this season. It looked like the Phillies could have kind of raced with the Braves in the East, but not the case anymore, unfortunately. But I think that definitely hurt them a lot.
All right, the next shocker from the deadline yesterday. This is one that I really did not expect. The Rays picking up Jesus Aguilar. This is a move that reminds me of something they did last year, where they picked up an NL Central asset undervalued on the cheap, which was Tommy Pham. They got from the Cardinals. Now they got Aguilar, who's had a down year. I mean, he's been platooning with Thames. He probably is going to be in a platoon spot in Tampa, at least to start with CJ Cron. But I like this pickup. I mean, here's the thing. When the Rays call you and say, we like this guy, I would hang up the phone and be like, oh, I like that guy too. The Rays know what they're doing.
Yes, they certainly know what they're doing. And Jesus Aguilar, definitely a big strikeout, but will contribute. He's had a down year this year. I think he has, maybe less than 10 home runs this year or something. But last year hit about 35, 36 home runs. So he has pop at the plate. He certainly has a good bat that he swings. But I do like it for the Rays because they're definitely on the up and up for the future and for these several years to come. And I think Jesus Aguilar, I think he could add a lot to the Rays and he can contribute a lot over there in Tampa.
Now let's talk about the Cubs, who are the team that I follow the closest here in Chicago. I typically don't bring fandom into the podcast, so I'm not going to, be cheerleading them on here. But the Cubs and your Astros made a trade yesterday.
Yes.
That was interesting. Maldonado, who just came over to the Cubs about a week ago, already on his way out. I think what the Cubs what they did there was they were expecting Contreras to be out longer. Like, we need some help here at catcher. And so then they got rid of him. But I like what he brought to the Cubs as a veteran because the Cubs don't have a lot of veteran guys. I wish they had some more. I think that would make them a better team. But in addition to that, they're not very good defensively at catcher. Wilson Contreras, when he came up, a lot of people, we all looked at him as like, this guy's got the tools to potentially be an excellent defensive catcher, and he just hasn't developed that way. He's got a great arm, but doesn't block the balls. He's not great at blocking balls, and his pitch framing isn't very good. So Maldonado was a big upgrade defensively, where the Cubs are struggling mightily defensively, which we'll talk about a little more most likely. But this was a good ad for the Astros, I think. Because Tony Kemp was a guy that they just DFA'd, and they were able to turn him into Maldonado, who helped them out a lot last year.
Yeah, it's funny because Maldonado, we got him right at this time last season. He helped us out a lot in the playoffs. Certainly Gold Glove caliber of a catcher, and very great defensively. He even contributed a couple times, I think, unexpectedly at the plate for the Astros in the playoffs. Only thing is that I absolutely love Tony Kemp, and I'm so sad that he's leaving Houston and he's now going over to Chicago. Y'all are getting one heck of a guy, first of all, and he I think he could help y'all out so much, and I think he has a bright future. He's still pretty young, and he can play anywhere in the field in terms of infield and outfield. Besides, he can play middle infield. He can also play any outfield position. He's very quick. He could also be used, I think, as a pinch runner or even a pinch hitter in the postseason play if he does not get a starting role position with the Cubs. But Tony Kemp, y'all are getting one heck of a player in Kemp. And I do like Maldonado. I think Houston, we've had a little bit of not a catcher problem, but just too many catchers. But yesterday we also sent off Max Stassi, who he's been in the system, in the Astros system for quite a while, ever since I believe the 14 and 15 seasons, when that was even before the Astros started winning games, which is, it's almost hard to remember it that way. But he's been in the system for a while, and they've also made they've sent off several other catchers at different places. But now Maldonado, he's able to back up. And the pitching staff for the Astros, Verlander and Cole, they loved pitching with Maldonado behind the plate last year. And so I think this is going to help the pitching staff, if anything, for the Astros this upcoming season or this postseason.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. Let's talk. I'm going to mention a couple other trades the Cubs made. They did make some changes to their roster. The big one being adding Nicholas Castellanos yesterday from Detroit, who I like a lot as a player. He's a really, really good hitter, a little underrated. However, I think the Cubs are going to need to play him in left field because, and I think this should mean that Schwarber is not going to play as much because Castellanos is not a very good defender. Schwarber has struggled in left field. It's well documented. You can't do Castellanos at third and move Bryant to right because Bryant's not very good in the outfield. And then you're moving Hayward over from a position he's elite at. So I think this should spell, and it's not going to because I know the way Joe Madden thinks, and he's going to prioritize offense over everything, just even though Schwarber's only hitting like 220. Let's be real here.
I think Schwarber, I love watching him just on the field because he hits the ball so hard and so far. But really, if you look at him from a production value, he's underperformed, I think, for the Cubs this season. And I think a lot of people don't look too far into that. But he's definitely more of the designated hitter, maybe. And, who knows, maybe he's getting a little tired from just playing the field all the time. Maybe that's taken away from his production at the plate. But I believe, didn't Schwarber come up as a catcher into the league? Yes. So that would probably make sense if he, moving around different places, maybe a little bit uncomfortable for him. But, he's a phenomenal hitter in terms of his power. He can definitely knock the ball off the cover. I think if the Cubs, if they had the opportunity to have a DH, that would be I think he'd be their DH automatically, but unfortunately, they don't have that playing in the National League.
Yeah.
Which they do have to figure that out.
I know this is going to ruffle some feathers here, what I'm about to say.
Okay.
But as an objective journalist watching the Cubs, I like to call myself a journalist. Maybe I'm not a journalist.
You're a journalist. You're a journalist.
Okay. So here's something that I guarantee we're going to see at some point this year. We're going to see a historically bad defensive lineup where it's going to be something like Bodie at third base. Bryant's going to get a day off. Javi Baez at short, who, by the way, no one is talking about the fact that he is second in errors at the position for shortstops, bottom 5 at the position in fielding percentage, has actually been below average at the position at short. I think he's a lot stronger at second base. His short, he does better on the shorter throw than the long throw. Doesn't quite have the range that other shortstops have. And I know this is something that a lot of people are getting mad hearing me say, because when you watch the highlights, he does stuff that is just phenomenal. He does stuff that no one else does. But metrically, he hasn't been that great defensively at short. Bodie has been below average at third base. They don't really have a second baseman at the moment. They're kind of figuring that out since they moved Baez over to short and they sent Addison Russell down to AAA to clear his head. You got Descalso, who struggled. Bodie has struggled. They just sent down Robel Garcia. So you could have a lineup with Bodie at third, Baez at short, whomever at second that probably isn't great defensively. Descalso's actually pretty good defensively, but he's not playing much anymore.
Yes, and I think that Tony Kemp trade could also solve their second base. So
true. Yeah, that's a good point. And then outfield of Happ in center, who is not a traditional outfielder, has struggled when he's played center. And then Schwarber in left, Castellanos in right. And it's like America's Funniest Home Videos, just brewing, waiting to happen.
Right? Well, it's funny because then you have Rizzo over at first, who's one of the best defensive first basemen in the entire league. Incredible.
He's bailed out so many guys.
Oh, absolutely. And which is funny because he's on a team like that. And then, of course, mentioning earlier, we already talked about Contreras behind the plate. So it is kind of a circus, if you will, just defensively.
And that's what's so weird, because when they won the World Series, they had a great defensive team. Baez was a lot better at second base, in my opinion. And when you had Russell at short, Baez at second, that's as good a middle infield as you can get defensively. Addison Russell, people forget. I know he needs some time right now to clear his head. I'm not saying that, he was having a great year or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but 2016, Addison Russell was a very good player. Brian is a good third baseman. And then, Hayward and Wright is one of the best. He's a Gold Glover. And Almora, when he plays center, is excellent. And so, they have those guys. It's just they're not using them that way. And then when you keep shuffling everyone around and no one gets consistent reps or comfortability, of course there are going to be some miscues. So it's just so weird that they've regressed so much defensively in such a short amount of time.
Absolutely. And of course they play in Wrigley Field, which and I think is very hitter friendly. But it is, because they do have, it is important, I think, for the Cubs to have very good defense. But it is interesting because that championship team, they were just so solid. I remember, I believe, what was the 2017 All-Star game? I think the entire starting infield for the NL team.
2016.
Was it 2016 when they actually made? Okay, it was all Cubs. Yeah, I remember. It was the entire infield was Cubs. And
it was Rizzo, Zobrist, Russell, and Bryant.
Yes. And so, that just speaks to just how much these players are changing, I think, after a couple of years. And they still have, obviously more potential to get back to how they were when they're, a couple of years younger. But, but they also have more people to come up in their farm system. And so they'll definitely figure out where they need to, put guys or moves and switch guys around. But that is a good point to bring up. It's something I think not a lot of people talk about, and that speaks so much truth, especially to Baez.
Yeah. Well, I like Castellanos a lot. I want to make that clear. I just think that I hope they aren't going to use him in a form that's going to make their defense worse, which likely will happen in some way. I just think I would slot him in left field a lot. I mean, maybe you don't play him every day. Maybe you can shuffle him around a little bit. But I think he should become your primary left fielder at the moment. And I'm sorry to Kyle, because I think Kyle still has a bright future ahead of him. I think he could be a really good DH somewhere. But I like the Castellanos bat matching better for the Cubs right now than Schwarber's does, because they need some contact hitting. They're having a lot of problems leaving runners on base, leaving runners in scoring position, and having a contact hitter like Castellanos, who I voted for the All-Star game last year, that's a big get as long as they use him properly.
Yes, and I think Castellanos, if he is a little better defensively in right field, I think maybe he'd be a safer bet, or at least what Joe Madden could maybe be thinking, in right field than left field, just maybe because his arm strength is probably a little better than Schwarber's. But at the same time, I think he would be a good fit over in the left corner. So that's I think if they use him correctly, like you said, I think that could definitely make a big difference to their outfield. And again, they also do have Tony Kemp now, who can switch and rotate in and out of the outfield.
Yeah, and the other thing is that I would be fine with that if you didn't have Jason Hayward in right field. Jason Hayward is one of the best at that position. You move him over to center, it brings down his value, because now he's an average center fielder as opposed to a very above average right fielder.
Yes, he has a very above average arm, one of the best arms in the league, I think, of right field.
Made a great throw last night, by the way.
Oh, yes, I did see that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was not fielded cleanly at third base, but it was a great throw.
Yes. But yes, that is interesting that they have a little bit of defensive struggle over there in Chicago. Those are your boys, man. Those are your guys.
Well, a couple other notes, just because I put some stuff on Twitter yesterday and I had a couple of fans coming at me. I did note that the Cubs gave up a guy named Alex Lang, and he was a first-round pick in 2017 out of LSU as a pitcher. So this is a guy, and it's really interesting. You look at this trade, either they overpaid for a rental player, or they just didn't draft well in that spot as a first-round pick. I think they didn't draft well because this guy has struggled mightily in the minors. And it kind of shows a little bit that this Theo Epstein, Jed Hoyer front office is not very adept at drafting pitching.
Yes, and it's funny that you say he was an LSU product because another guy who was also an LSU product, I believe that same year was Alex Bregman. Alex Bregman. And then who were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say Aaron Nola,
Yes.
but then I reminded myself that he was a few years ago. Actually, I think, wasn't Bregman 2015?
Bregman I believe was he 2015? What? Yes.
This was 2017.
Yes. Those are different years. And then, so yes, you're right about that.
And Nola was 2014.
2014. Okay, gotcha. But still, all LSU products, which, and they very well could have drafted, wrong because, they didn't have a great position, obviously, after winning the series.
Pick 30.
Yes. So that very much could have been the case. They may still have had that World Series high. You don't know, but but yeah, that is interesting that you noted that, Jack.
Yeah, one other perplexing move, and here's the thing. I know I'm going to get a lot of people that are saying that I'm being too hard or that I should be a bigger fan or whatever, but I mean, I try not to be as much a fan. I try to just look at things objectively and offer my thoughts. And the other move that was a little interesting was the Cubs did trade Carl Edwards Jr., who was once a very promising reliever. 2 years ago, this was a guy that people were looking at as he could be the guy they grew him into being a lights-out closer, showing a lot of that potential. They traded him yesterday for a lefty reliever, Brad Wick from San Diego. Have you heard of this guy?
I've not actually. I don't know much about Wick at all, but
yeah, I hadn't heard of him.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, again, I guess San Diego just kind of goes under the radar in general, but they traded a righty for a lefty, which is interesting. But I'm interested to see, what is that going to do for the Cubs? I really don't know much about him at all.
Well, the Cubs do need a lefty reliever, but this guy they got back has an ERA over 6 this year. So
yes.
It's just kind of, it's like, okay, look, I think I'm happy for Carl because I think he needs a fresh start somewhere. I think the Cubs kind of ruined him, to tell you the truth, because they overworked him 3 years in a row. They messed with his pitching, his throwing from the stretch this past spring training. They taught him a move that was a balk, and then the league office told him, look, that's a balk, you can't throw that way, and he had to go down to the minors and retool again entirely. So I think they goofed up this guy. I feel bad for him. I think he could still be a very good pitcher, have a great career. I think this is a great pickup for San Diego. The other thing that I don't understand is why the Cubs felt that they needed to send their international signing bonus money. They sent a little bit of international signing money in this deal too. So it was like, that's odd.
Yeah, and in terms of Wick, if his ERA is so high, maybe it's because he is coming from, I believe, the NL West, and so
yeah.
I mean, obviously you do have Colorado and Los Angeles as well, and even the Diamondbacks who've been hitting pretty well this season, and so he probably has gotten banged up a little bit this season, but in terms of that international bonus, that is pretty interesting. There's a lot of things that people, I guess, the trade itself really won't tell you, but you really have to read into it. But that is pretty. That's good insight on your part, Jack.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I'm looking around at some other moves. The Rays did pick up Eric Sogard over the weekend, who seemed to be a popular commodity. A lot of people wanted him. He's having a nice year. That's a nice little pickup.
Yes, and I think he had a pretty big weekend, and then he got sent off, I believe. I think he had a couple home runs this past weekend.
Yeah. The Twins picked up Sam Dyson from the Giants, who also used to pitch for the Rangers. He's a good reliever. That's a nice little pickup. Are there any others that we forgot to mention that you made note of?
Maybe just the other big Astros trade, which, I mean, obviously I don't want to sit here and talk about the Astros all day, even though I could, but just I think the Astros definitely got the best end of the stick when it was the very last trade made before the deadline, and I think it got kind of overshadowed by the Greinke trade. But it was between the Blue Jays and the Astros. The Astros sent Derek Fisher, who he had some postseason action the end of last season with the Astros. He's now in Toronto, and the Astros were able to acquire Aaron Sanchez, former All-Star. Joe Biagini, who's done phenomenal in the pen for the Blue Jays this season, and they also got Cal Stevenson, who's been in their system, and so I think the Astros definitely stole some good pieces from the Jays, but this helps. It definitely helps the Astros a lot more because they are going to be in a playoff race, and now just looking at the Astros rotation, I mean they have 5 guys who at one point have been in an All-Star jersey. 1 through 5. And when Greinke, is pretty much your number 3 guy, I mean, that's trouble for other teams. And I think Biagini, the Astros definitely had some holes in their bullpen. They had trouble finishing games and completing games. And when you have a starting pitching like that, a rotation like that, it's very hard, to just keep that perfectly intact. But Biagini is going to help them out a lot. Going down the road this postseason. And so I think it was a great trade. Derek Fisher for the Blue Jays, he's a great guy, I think. And now since they have several young outfielders, a lot of young players, I believe they have Kevin Biggio now in their system.
Bo Bichette just got called up, which every time I hear his name, I think of Boba Fett from Star Wars.
Yes. Yeah. He's a shorter guy. I think he just hit a home run yesterday, his first one,
he did.
I believe. And so Derek Fisher, I think with the couple years of experience, will be able to relate to some of those guys more. And so he could be in that mix, coming up with some of those guys as well for the next season or two. But I think it's a great trade on the Astros end. But the Blue Jays also got a very solid outfielder.
Chad, help me out here for a second. That the year the Astros won the World Series, 2017,
yes,
there was that game that went really, really late into extras where they ran out of ads, where they weren't doing ads anymore.
Yes.
Wasn't Derek Fisher that he scored either the game-winning run or had the game-winning hit in that game?
So that was Game 5 of the 2017 series, and Alex Bregman hit the walk-off single, and it was Derek Fisher who scored the winning run.
From second base, right?
Yes. It was just kind of a bloop over. Well, it was a hard hit ball, but I mean, over the shortstop, very shallow into the outfield. And Derek Fisher, he's very quick. He has good wheels on him, and so they used him throughout that postseason, just that kind of as a pinch runner. They would pinch hit him every now and then, but yes, Derek Fisher is very quick, but. Now that the Astros have a guy named Miles Straw, who just has been brought up from the minor league system, he's one of the quickest guys, one of the best runners in the league right now, and so that fills that gap kind of and just kind of gets rid of some of the excess guys that the Astros had float around the system. But yeah, I'm actually surprised that you remembered that. You have a sharp memory, Jack.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's definitely not a popular guy. I mean, I know Astros fans who probably don't even know who Derek Fisher is, but the fact that you remembered that's clever of you.
Well, I know he's memorable to NBA fans too, because they think of the Lakers point guard
of Derek Fisher, the guard. Yeah,
Fish.
Yes. Well, and Derek Fisher is fairly tall for an outfielder. He's like 6'4", 6'5", so and he's got long strides. That's probably where he gets his speed from. But he's fairly tall, which could maybe make sense if they get that mixed up a little bit. But
yeah, maybe he'd be a good basketball player.
Maybe. I mean, he's got the quickness, the agility. He also has a beard. He has red hair and a nice red beard. So maybe he can kind of mix in with that. You never know. Maybe he has a different calling. If he goes over to Toronto.
Another Phillies trade, they picked up Jason Vargas, get a little help in their pitching rotation that has stumbled quite a bit this year. I know they had some higher hopes for Vince Velasquez and Zach Eflin. Any thoughts on that? Or, I mean, that's just one thing toss out there, make note of.
Yeah, I mean, Vince Velasquez was a former Astro, so I do know. Yeah, yes, and he came up with the Astros, and I know the Phillies as well as the Astros. They used him as a closer because he is a very hard throwing pitcher. He very regularly gets up into 98, 99. He's touched 100 a couple times, but that would make sense because he's still a very young guy, and so younger guys who I think throw harder have a lot of trouble locating, controlling, and it's also hard to stay healthy because Velasquez has battled a little bit of health issues with his arm, but it is hard to stay healthy because you're throwing so many innings and you're expected just to throw so hard, especially coming out of the pen in that change of time from going to a starting pitching role, then getting moved over to the pen. It kind of messes up your arm a little bit. So that would also make sense why they're kind of struggling over there a little bit in Philadelphia.
Yeah. I got one last Cubs thought, and I'm going to flip it over to you for something else. I'm going to say that I think the Cubs were overall smart at this deadline because they did make a couple moves, and I thought they were all, maybe not the Edwards deal. I don't know if that was the best trade. I think it was the best deal for Edwards. I think it's going to be great for him. I think it was a good deal for San Diego. And hey, if that lefty reliever ends up being good, then that works out great for both teams. I think that the Cubs made a smart move not trying to overspend on a piece or two pieces that they think would radically alter this team, because I don't think that one or two pieces would change the trajectory of how well this team does. I think if this team is going to win, the players are going to need to perform better. I think the culture needs to somehow change, but personally, I've been saying all year, I think this is a wild card team. I think that's where they're going to end up. And so I think they were smart not to try to make a couple of big trades that would maybe indicate that all of a sudden that they're all in, because they have emptied their farm system on some of these big trades. And while the Chapman deal helped them win a World Series, the Quintana deal has not panned out the way they would have liked. They gave up Eloy Jimenez, who is a blossoming young star on the South Side. Everyone loves him. His rookie card is worth a lot, by the way. So I think they were smart not to try to force some big trade here, because I think if they're going to make some more dramatic changes to the roster, which may need to come, because I do think they do have some serious problems here with knocking runners in. I just don't know if it's the best balance of bats because they have so many power hitters. I'd like them to have a few more contact guys in the middle of the order, guys who are really good with runners in scoring position. I don't know if it's fair to expect those guys to change radically in the middle of the year, the whole team to radically change. I think it's smarter for them if they want to make some drastic and dramatic, I guess they're now one word, dramatic, changes to this team, then it's going to come in the offseason, because then they have the free agent market to work with. They do have some guys that they can move. You've got Almora, you've got Schwarber, you've got Happ, you've got Addison Russell, a couple of guys in the minors too. I don't know if there's space for all those young guys who have all played in the bigs to really space for them all to grow. And I mean, it is a little unfortunate for them that they didn't sell higher on maybe some of those players that they could have earlier, but the Cubs are just in a weird spot. So I think they made the right move not trying to force some crazy trade, because truthfully, I don't think it would have solved the problem significantly.
Right, and especially a team like the Cubs, who doing very well now. A lot of teams would probably expect them to get to make one of those big moves. And I mean, you saw other teams like the Astros and as well as like the Braves, who did had very successful trade deadline days and very successful weeks. But that's not always the case. Just like you said, that's not always the you must do this to do well this postseason, because what they have over there in Chicago now, they're still doing all right. They're still on pace to do very well to make the postseason if they are to make the postseason. And so you don't want to mess up that chemistry too much, which I do agree with you, Jack. I like that they were a little bit more conservative. Obviously with Castellanos, I think that's great. But, they're definitely a little more conservative, which I think was a smart move by Chicago. Yeah.
So overall, I would say the Cubs were deadline winners at the end of the day.
well, mate, I don't know about that. Maybe.
Well, they weren't losers at least, because they've been losers in the past.
They certainly were not losers. Yes, I think they're very smart in the way that they handled the deadline this year.
The other thing on my Cubs rant, I think that there's just something about the culture of this team that right now does not show a whole lot of urgency to win. It seems like they've just grown complacent and they're content with being a wild card team. They don't seem to have that hunger and that drive and that desire that when they go into one of these must-win games, they're going to come out of it with the win. This, by the way, last night was their first win at Busch Stadium this year, believe it or not.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, they're like neck and neck, I believe, with the Cardinals.
Yeah, they're tied for first place.
Last night. They're tied for first place. Yeah, and they still have, I believe Washington. Is it Washington that's now back in the race?
Yeah.
Where, they're right there with both of those teams now, I believe, and so. And Milwaukee, obviously, Milwaukee too. So I mean, there's definitely nothing set in stone, and this is like in a very urgent time, I think, to start winning ball games. I mean, they can't drop series if the Cubs want to find themselves in October, and so this is very urgent. I think the culture should be different if that's not the case for the Cubs right now. But that is really interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be October 4th or 5th, and they just lost a wild card game, and I'm going to be giving my spiel about how to improve this team for the future, which I did last year. I just don't think they really changed a whole lot over the offseason. I think if they are to compete, the offseason is the time for them to make the big changes, not in the middle of the season doing it on the fly. So that concludes my Cubs thoughts for today. Plenty more to come later this season. Chad, this was a lot of fun. Before we go, let me ask you, any teams that surprised you by not making a move? Mets, we did talk about the Yankees a little bit. We did talk about the Mets, I suppose. Any other trades that you thought were to happen? Maybe Mike Minor going somewhere? What surprised you in terms of something that did not happen?
I think one team that I was looking at, besides the Mets, were the Twins. I think the Twins, they're set up to. They did get Sam Dyson, and so that was great. But I was expecting them to maybe add a little more depth to their rotation because they're knocking the cover off the ball. I mean, they're on pace to have like the most home runs by a team, I think, at some point this season. And so I was expecting them to maybe to add a little more depth to their rotation. Maybe the Twins potentially getting a guy like Syndergaard, or maybe for them to get somebody like that. I could have seen Stroman maybe going over there as well, but then the Twins probably would have had to given up a lot more, and I think it would have been harder for them to make that deal than versus the Mets making that deal. But I was a little bit surprised by the Twins, how they weren't more of a big name in the deadline. They really only made like one move. I was a little bit surprised by the Twins. I think the Mets as well. I was expecting Syndergaard to go somewhere, but
or Wheeler.
Or Wheeler as well. Yes, Zach Wheeler potentially could have landed in Houston. Lunho, I know, was talking a lot with Zach Wheeler, and he would have been great, but obviously I think we got a way better deal with Zach Greinke, so we got a better Zach than Wheeler and Greinke. But I was surprised by those two teams.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything else. I feel like we covered everything today. I got one. I thought the White Sox would have sold Alex Colomé.
Yes, the White Sox, there was a lot of the White Sox have been very, very quiet, and there was even a lot of talk about them. Like, I remember prior to the season, the White Sox are supposed to get, possibly Manny Machado or Bryce Harper, but nothing happened really. And then, of course, now the trade deadline, they didn't really do anything. So they've kind of removed themselves from a lot of acquisition opportunities, which it is a little bit surprising, but I was surprised on that as well.
Yeah, people were talking about leading up to this, would Jose Abreu potentially be on the market with this being the last year of his deal? They value him as a veteran leader for their young guys, so I think that's what they ended up doing. They didn't want to sacrifice him, and then I know a lot of teams like to do this where we're going to ship a guy away and then we want him to somehow sign with us after we do that, which is like, a guy breaks his girlfriend's heart and then 3 months later says, "Oh, I'm sorry, babe. It's okay, right?"
No, yeah. Maybe there was a story like that in that. I don't know, but no, Jose Abreu. I could see him potentially going to a team like maybe the Yankees or, after this offseason. I think he will be one of the bigger names going into this offseason, and so we could see him going a big place. I think, and him signing a big contract.
Well, Chad, I think we covered everything today. I think we did it,
Jack, and I'm so happy that we're just able to just spend time chatting, especially on your birthday, man. What a special day for you, Jack. We can't forget about that. That Mr. Vita today, 25 years old. Wow, that
halfway to 50.
You're halfway to half a century. Happy birthday, man. Seriously, what a day today.
Thank you very much, Chad. Before I let you go, do you have any, you're not a big social media guy, but if you got any social media you want to throw out there, typically people throw out their Twitter handle, or are there any projects that you're working on right now that people should check out? Radio show coming back this fall, anything?
Yeah, so I do have a radio show with KTCU Radios with Texas Christian University, and so this fall I will be continuing my sports talk show. It's called The Cheap Seats, and you can tune in on KTCU Radio. That's ktcu.com, and you can tune in to the radio show on, I believe, we're scheduled to do Wednesdays at 5 p.m., and then we're also in the works of getting The Cheap Seats on Spotify. And so hopefully, hopefully if I have the opportunity and pleasure again to come back on the Jack Vita show, then I will definitely be letting everybody know where you can stream and check out The Cheap Seats. Just an all sports talk show, very similar to what Jack has here. He's doing a phenomenal job, by the way. And so, this definitely encouraged me a lot, I think, just to be on this show today on the Vita show. And so, yes, definitely check out The Cheap Seats. I myself, as well as my co-host Tim Daly, host it once a week. And so hopefully there will be more information on that if I am to join Jack again in the future.
I feel like that sentence just didn't really work. My buddy Tim Daly, and we record this weekly.
I'm sorry. Wait, did I misspeak or?
No. I'm making a joke.
Oh, okay.
His name's Daly. Why don't you call him Weekly?
Oh, yeah.
It was a bad joke.
Tim Daly. No. I get it now. Sorry, I was zoned out for a second. I was like, wait. Yeah, Tim Daly and we record a weekly podcast, and you can listen to it monthly, and then it'll come on yearly.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Chad. I hope to have you on in the future. College football coming up soon. Baseball always great. I talk baseball any month of the year, really.
Oh, yes.
College football, college basketball, lots to look forward to this fall. And I'm sure you will be returning to this podcast soon.
I would absolutely love that. Please let me know when you talk more baseball, especially, and college sports. Jack and I, we both know we're both big college football and basketball fans, and so that would definitely be a fun conversation, just as fun as it was today, Jack. But I appreciate everything that you've done today, and I really enjoyed myself being on the show today. So thank you so much, Jack.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much, Chad. Very kind words there. Let's do one. I'm going to give you 30 seconds before we go.
Okay.
I keep teasing that we're about to leave.
No, I love this.
Do you pay attention to Big Ten football at all?
Every now and then, yeah. I think more so, probably not as closely as you, just because you're in the region. But
yeah, exactly.
But as a whole, I'll look at it every now and then.
Let me just say, put your money on Northwestern this year.
Well, I know they made a bowl game this past year, and
they've won a few bowl games in a row now. I think 3 in a row.
Yes, and weren't they were in the they were in the Big Ten championship this past year, weren't they?
Yeah, they were, and they played a close game with Ohio State up until the fourth quarter.
Yes.
Look, Big Ten is different. Urban Meyer's gone. It's a new day.
It is.
There's hope for other teams. Maybe it's Michigan's year to finally break through and beat Ohio State.
They say that every year, though. I mean, that's every year with Michigan, and Harbaugh hasn't done anything over there. So,
well, he's done a lot. He's
done
up that program, but they need to win now. It's time to win that game.
Yeah, in terms as a whole, I mean, they're expecting national championship from Michigan, and he just hasn't done that yet. But if it's not Jim's year, then I think Northwestern. I don't think that's a crazy statement at all. I think that they could kind of just come out unexpectedly and do well in Big Ten play. You're right. I don't think that's definitely out of the blue in any way.
Well, I guess it's the way I look at it, and I'm not saying Northwestern's going to win the Big Ten, but they're going to be in there. They're going to be in the mix because you got the Big Ten West, Big Ten East. And Big Ten East, you've got in the East is Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State. All the heavy hitters are out there, all the blue chip programs. And then in the West, it's really going to be Northwestern, Nebraska, Iowa, and Wisconsin are the big four that you look at because maybe Indiana's a little better. Illinois, maybe they start to turn the corner, but those aren't quite the heavy hitters. So Northwestern's got those teams that they can play. They only lost one conference game last year, which was the game to Michigan where they were up 17 at the half. And they've got a 5-star quarterback starting for them this year, Hunter Johnson, who transferred in from Clemson. So that when you have a great quarterback, you can win a lot of games.
Yes, I do remember hearing Hunter Johnson going over there, and especially now that he has experience in a top program, one of the best programs in the country. Then I think he brings that great experience to Northwestern. And then in terms of Northwestern side of the division, or the conference, you really only have Nebraska, who everyone's like, well, how they won 4 games last season, and people, I think there's a lot of hype on them. Well, Nebraska, they're going to be a 9-win program, 10-win program this year. But I think that's still, for Scott Frost, I think that's still going to be asking a lot from him. And so I think it's looking really good for Northwestern. Obviously, if they are to make it to the championship game, they will be playing, I think, a team who we could see in the college football playoff, like Penn State. Definitely has, I think, a really good shot of making the college football playoff this year. But I think it's looking pretty good for Northwestern. I don't think that that's a crazy statement at all, that they're going to be in big contention in the conference this year.
Yeah, Northwestern's whole thing, they keep games close and they win a lot of close games. They do. It's their MO. And so it's fitting for them that all they got to do is just hang around, win those close games, and they can sneak their way into the Big Ten championship. So they're interesting. They're going to be fun to watch.
I'm going to have to look out for Northwestern a little more. I'd watch them every now and then when they play in the big games, but now that we talked about this, we'll have to keep each other updated on how they do.
Really good defense too. So I'm excited to go to some games this year. They're right by my house. Went to a game last year, but Chad, we got to cut it off. We're at an hour and a half, man.
Oh, we could keep going. We could go on and on. So which is, it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. We got to let them cut us off. Yeah. But again, Jack, really enjoyed my time on this show. This is an absolute pleasure, if anything.
Great. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, I'll talk to you soon, Jack. Thank you so much.
That does it for my conversation with Chad Vautherine. Did I say that correctly?
Chad Vautherine.
Vautherine, man.
Yes.
Such a long podcast. Forgot it. That's it for Chad. He's gone now, actually, this time. Thank you so much to everyone who listened to this podcast. If you like what you heard today, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Jack Vita Show. Follow on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Just subscribe. It helps a lot with growing the podcast, getting the word out to your friends. Tell a friend about it today if you like what you heard. Send this someone's way. It was a lot of fun covering baseball. I'll be back on the podcast doing something next week. TBA and TBD, to tell you the truth. Not sure what we'll be doing. I'm going to have a fun interview coming up in about 2 weeks from now with a Survivor contestant. Leslie Neese competed on Survivor China. So we're going to take a little detour from the world of sports, talk about the world of reality TV, editing, everything of that nature. Should be a really fun conversation you will not want to miss. We will also talk about faith and the element that plays on a reality TV show, especially one where you are starving on an island for 39 days. Should be a really fun episode. Even if you haven't watched Survivor, you can learn a little bit. That should be a fun one. Had a great time talking with Mario Lanza last week. We talked a lot about potential rule changes in Major League Baseball. So if that interests you, go back and listen to it. We also talked about the induction of Edgar Martinez. If you want to get in touch with me on social media, my Twitter handle is @TheJackVita. Give me a follow. Tweet me your thoughts on the podcast today. Love interacting with folks on there. Tell me what you think. Who are the winners? Who are the losers of the trade deadline this year? Go ahead, tweet me. Look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you so much to everyone for listening to the podcast today. Hope everyone has a great first weekend of August, enjoys the rest of the summer. Safe travels to anyone who's going out of town this weekend. I'm out for now. I'm going to go enjoy my weekend up in Wisconsin. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. Bring in the dancing lobsters.